What is going on, everybody? Welcome back again to The Haunted Beard. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited for today's video. Ari Aster is one of my very favorite directors working today in horror, and he's in probably my top two or three. And I wanted to do something a little bit different because Ari Aster has a handful of short films, and I went through the list. There's like 7 of them, and I watched all of them and just wanted to talk about them. Because obviously, if you know Ari Aster, you know about his big movies, Hereditary and Midsommar, which I'm a huge fan of. But he's got a bunch of short films that I wanted to check out and just dig a little bit deeper into his filmography. So today we're going to be discussing the short films of Ari Aster. So first up, I want to talk about The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. And this is his longest short film, clocks in at about 28 minutes. And this is described as a dark domestic horror drama about the bonds that bind families together. And I can honestly tell you, hand to God, this is one of the most horrifically disturbing films I've ever seen. And this movie is messed up in a very different kind of way. And the horror here, and I won't get into specifics to not kind of ruin the impact and the effectiveness of it if you haven't seen it yet. But the horror here involves the father and son relationship, and it's dealing with something that I can't recall having ever seen dealt with in another movie. And the film opens up with, I'll just say, a very kind of awkward and uncomfortable scene. And so immediately you know you're in some kind of different territory. And it's not horrifying right from the get-go, but it is, as I said, awkward and uncomfortable, and you feel a little icky. And then there is, I'll just say, a turning of a picture at the end of the first scene that this thing just, it's already disturbing, and this thing just plunges down into the deepest depths of messed up horror levels that you just can't really be prepared for until you watch it. There's a scene later on in the movie where I'll just say father is in a bathtub. And what makes this so effective, too, is that there's not much here that's actually shown. A lot of it is more implied. You get, in that particular scene, more kind of sound effects in noises and stuff like that. And truly, this is one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. And in all honesty, I would say it's even more so than Midsommar and Hereditary. And it's not something I really care to ever rewatch or go back to, but it is something that has stuck with me. And this is a difficult one to even say, would I recommend? But, if you're like me and you love Ari Aster and you want to explore his short films, go for it. But don't say I didn't warn you, because this movie is a rough one. And so that's The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. Let's move on to the next one. Next up is TDF Really Works. This also came out 2011. This is his shortest short film, clocking in at only 2 minutes. And this is more or less this like fake advertisement commercial for a very specific product. And this really kind of introduces you to Ari Aster's sense of humor. There's a few of his short films that are comedies and not just straight up horror films. And he has a very, I'll just say, different and unique sense of humor. And I hope to see him make sort of a comedy film one day. And TDF Really Works is another film that I would describe as whacked out. I had absolutely no clue what this was about going into it, as I did with really any of these. And it has just this absurd sense of humor. It's a very adolescent, crude sense of humor to it. And it is something that is kind of uncomfortable in a way to watch as a guy, but also just like kind of hilariously absurd and ridiculous. And again, it just kind of bottles up Ari Aster's sense of humor in 2 minutes. And it was just kind of such an unexpected little watch, because again, having only seen his 2 feature films that are very steeped in the horror genre, seeing this guy's sense of humor just kind of bust out was something just unexpected. And yeah, this is, like I said, it's a 2-minute short. There's not a whole lot to say about it without really kind of unveiling what it's really about. But you kind of just got to watch it. It was kind of one of those things, I was sitting there just kind of shaking my head with my jaw dropped, like I had no clue what I was getting ready to watch. So, yeah, check it out. Next up is Bo. This also came out in 2011. This one clocks in at about 8 minutes. And man, this is a really good one. This is a really good example of Ari Aster horror and also his comedy. And if you've watched any of my videos, one of the things that I say, I love the horror genre, obviously. I have an entire channel dedicated to it. But one of the subgenres that is kind of the most hit or miss for me is sort of the horror comedy. And so watching this, saying that it's a horror comedy is not something that I would kind of typically jive with. But Ari Aster's sense of humor is pretty good. And like he's really able to weave like kind of these genuinely creepy moments with genuine sort of almost like slapstick type comedy a little bit here and there. And it's pretty funny and also pretty creepy. And it's just this quick little story about this guy who plans a trip to go visit his mother, but his keys get inexplicably stolen and it delays the trip. And this thing just has so much crammed into its like 8-minute runtime. It's just a pretty fun little ride. And the lead performance by Billy Mayo is really good. It's just fun to watch. His behavior and performance is just funny. And it's entertaining to just watch all of his reactions to the kind of total chaos and insanity that develop over the 8 minutes of this movie. There's a particular scene where I'll just say there's an intruder, and then there's this like, it's like this creepy moment, but then it leads to this like great sort of comedic punchline that's pretty funny. I like how there's just kind of this like unexplained rudeness from like random characters that he comes across that I just thought was, again, funny. And this just has a really sort of weird and bizarre final shot that I'm not entirely sure what to make of. And also, too, his feature-length film that's getting ready to come out later this year, Beau is Afraid, apparently he kind of has drawn some inspiration from this film. And so it's got me even more interested and curious in that, being that I like this one so much. So Beau is Afraid is my most anticipated movie of the year, and I would say I'm anticipating it even more now. So definitely looking forward to it. Next up is Munchausen, and this came out in 2013 and clocks in at about 17 minutes. And this is one that you can definitely tell there is a higher production value to it, just in terms of just the production design and the lighting and the costuming and things like that. It looks like they put more money into this. And this is another one that I liked and enjoyed. And it's one that I didn't like maybe as much as some of the others, but it's something I definitely appreciate because, again, it kind of sticks out as its own unique thing. And one of the things that I've gathered, having now watched all of his short films, is Ari Aster just has such a diverseness about him. Like, all of these movies really kind of stand out as individual and something that is unique and different and just creative in their own right. And obviously he sticks largely to the horror genre, but even within that, there's just so much kind of diversity amongst it. And Munchausen is one that I was kind of able to figure out what it was going to do and where it was going to go just by the title alone. But the way he presents the story is, again, just really unique and I think creative. This entire thing is a silent movie. And it tells a story of this mother and her son she is having to prepare as he gets ready to go off to college. And it's all done just with a musical score underneath it. And you're able to just obviously follow the story as it is told visually. And it definitely gave me some sort of like Disney Pixar type vibes to it. And I think he kind of executes that type of vibe and atmosphere really well. You can also tell here just that the camera shots and the camera movements are just kind of more well thought out and constructed. There's just some more interesting kind of editing choices and like sort of transition sequences and stuff like that as well. The musical score is just kind of this big, bold, very kind of dramatic, emotional, intense type score to it. And because it's a silent film, it has kind of a theatrical type feel to it, just in terms of the performances. They're very kind of just dramatic and a bit kind of over the top and stuff like that. But again, this one just, again, stands out because it is different and I enjoyed the presentation of it. So I had a pretty good time with Munchausen as well. Next up is Basically, and this came out in 2014, clocks in at about 15 minutes. This one stars Rachel Brosnahan, and this one also too has a unique type presentation to it. As her main character, she breaks the fourth wall and addresses the camera directly in every single scene in this film. And it tells the story. She is this rich girl who is living in LA and is kind of in the early stages of starting her acting career. And it really just follows her from different set piece to different set piece as she just addresses the audience through the camera and kind of just talks about her life. And this was the only one that I would say I didn't like get much out of. Like, it was fine, it was okay. And she says in the beginning how she is not this sort of spoiled, stuck-up rich girl, and then goes on for the next 15 minutes kind of complaining about all of her problems. And it's just kind of like, okay. And I think there is some credit deserved to the writing of it. And it's more or less just her kind of rambling about some of her life experiences and relationships and some of her beliefs and just some of the stuff that she has gone through. And that's really about it. And so in the end, I wasn't entirely sure what to make of it. And it's kind of shot, I guess, in an interesting way where it just kind of each take is just a few minutes long of her just talking to the camera. It's kind of a wide static shot of her at a different location. And as I said, in the end, I wasn't entirely sure what to make of it. It kind of didn't really, there's not really any kind of story here either. And so it's just her just kind of talking about life. And the performance is pretty good, I guess, but I just didn't really get a whole lot out of this one. Next up is The Turtle's Head, and this came out, great title, by the way, once you know what this one's actually about, but I'm not going to give that away because it kind of steals the punchline. But this one came out in 2014 as well. It's about 12 minutes long, and this one is about this private investigator who is investigating this case and then unfortunately gets stricken with this very problematic medical issue. And I'll just leave it at that. But this one starts off as sort of this kind of parody on like detective film noir type movies. And the main character here, he's just this like pervert sleazeball who, hits on all the women and stuff like that. And I like to think that because of that, the ailment that affects him is kind of payback for all that. And anyways, this one too just really injects some of Ari Aster's sense of humor that is just weird, and his weird and bizarre sense of humor. There is no subtlety with his humor. It is very bold and in your face. And I thought it was pretty funny. There's not really any sort of horror in this. Well, actually there kind of is, at least if you're a guy anyway. I'll say that. But yeah, this one again is such this kind of unique, weird, kind of messed up and gross sort of thing that I think for a short film like this, it kind of works, and I pretty much enjoyed the whole thing. And I'm figuring out now that Ari Aster has this ability to kind of make me laugh and disturb me at the same time, which I think is a pretty sort of unique and special ability. And so I kind of really hope he injects some of this humor into his filmography in the future. But as I said, this one is pretty enjoyable. I think the main performance by Richard Reel, I think is how you pronounce his name, is pretty good and pretty funny. And I wish this one had a little bit of a better ending, but overall, yeah, it's an interesting one. And finally is Cest La Vie, which came out in 2016 and clocks in at 8 minutes. And this one here really kind of uses the exact same formula and setup as Basically. But this one here I enjoyed quite a bit more. And I think mainly it's just due to the character that we're following along this time. This time, instead of us following a rich girl from LA, we are following a homeless man. And this one is just, it's more funny and it's more entertaining than Basically. And I just found his angry ramblings and pessimistic take and outlook on life and humanity just darkly comedic. It's just like you're listening to the ramblings of a madman for 8 minutes, but it's pretty funny. And it reminded me quite a bit of like a George Carlin stand-up bit. And I have to think that Ari Aster was inspired by George Carlin. Just like having watched some of his stand-up, it just sounds so much similar to this guy. And I just found it pretty hilarious and enjoyable. So those are the short films of Ari Aster. I hope you like this video, something a little bit different, but like I said, he is one of my very favorite directors working right now, and so I just wanted an opportunity to talk about him, and I thought this might be something a little different and unique. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. This is what I do on The Haunted Beard. It is all horror and thriller movie content coming at you, so hit that button. Thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.